Hello, everyone. Hello to our communities on all of our platforms. I'm Melissa D. White, and I am joined by my dear friend and dynamic multifamily industry leader, Stephanie Puryear Helling. And we have been excitedly counting down to this moment. Oh my goodness, what an exciting day for us as we are publicly sharing the launch of the Faith Inspired Leadership and Property Management course. Woo! If I had
Woo!
fireworks, if I had a sign, a horn, whatever, we would do all of that. And so we want to welcome you and thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us, whether you're watching live or the replay. You've probably seen several of some of your favorite industry leaders posting about this new thing, this faith inspired leadership, and you're wondering, what is this? And some of you jumped right on the opportunity to say, I have to be a part of the faith inspired leadership and property management program. And so we're doing this live as a live info session, a Q&A session. You will be hearing from myself, Stephanie, and the just illustrious cohort of task force members comprised of just big name industry leaders, owner operators, supplier partners, and even from our partnership. This program, this dynamic program, came from the heart of the Community Growth Foundation in partnership with none other than the Grand Canyon University. Yes, that's right. The multifamily industry is making partnerships, extending our partnerships, if you will, with universities that are not just faith based, but Christ centered. And I want to introduce and to present to many of you who already know Stephanie Puryear Helling. Stephanie, again, is a dear friend of mine who, when she calls, we answer. And she put out the clarion call about 18 months to several of us in the multifamily property management industry and say, hey, we have a legacy work that we can do, something we can build together for kingdom, for Christ centered leaders. And if you know me, you know the moment you put those together, my faith and career and community, I'm hooked. And so, Stephanie, I'm so honored. Not only did you put out the call, but you have led this charge of our task force over the last 18 months. And so I just want to thank you and hear from you today as you share with our community, our audience, many of our industry friends about this dynamic program that we are now piloting and launching for faith inspired leadership and property management. Stephanie, let's hear from you. Why did you say yes to this call? Why was this in your heart? Tell us more about this program.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for that. What great warm welcome and your excitement about this initiative. It's been such an honor to have you. Thank you for saying yes when I reached out to you and said, hey, I have this big project with a huge vision. Will you join us? And you said yes. In fact, we both said, wow, this was a God thing, right? And it really was for you and for me. And so, I first got connected to Community Growth Foundation about 2 years ago this month, believe it or not. One of our mutual friends in the industry, Jeremy Edmonston, um, he and I worked together at Graystar many years ago, and we've stayed connected in the industry. And he's been connected to David Snyder at Community Growth Foundation for quite some time. David is the founder of Community Growth Foundation. So he and Erna, who is his chief of staff, reached out to me. And initially, I thought I was agreeing to just a few conversations to give them some guidance on how to put structure around creating a task force and a charter. And so I thought I was volunteering a little bit of my time to do that. And that was that. And on one of our calls, David said, do you mind if we pray for a moment? I said, of course, let's do that. And as he prayed, one of his prayers was, God, we pray that you will give Stephanie the wisdom and guidance to say yes when we ask her to lead this task force initiative. And so, of course, I did, and here we are. And that's similar to kind of what happened when I reached out to you and several other members of the task force. So, it really, I believe, was divine guidance that got me here. And I couldn't not say absolutely yes because I believe in the mission and that we see what we do in this industry, the people whose lives we touch, as a calling, and our goal is to help others who see this as a calling and not just a career or a job, to give them guidance and support to really make a huge impact and a difference in the lives of others. Because if you think about what we do in multifamily and property management, we provide homes, and your home is one of the most important things to you. So here we are, and I'm thrilled that we're finally here. So, um, if you don't know about Community Growth Foundation, as I mentioned, David Snyder is the founder of the Community Growth Foundation, which is a nonprofit, and he is also the leader of Continental Realty Group. So this faith inspired leadership and property management, faith based education for property management, has really been on his heart and a vision of his for many, many years. He's been socializing this concept to his board of directors, to people like Jeremy Edmonston, Rick Graff, Scott Wilder, many other leaders in the multifamily space, Pete Kelly with Apartment Life. Um, and so, we're finally here. In fact, when, David said, "Hey, will you lead this task force?" So we spent a lot of time doing behind the scenes work to put together a charter. So, what's the purpose? What's our mission? What's our vision? Um, who do we want to ask to be involved to help us create and bring this vision to life? And so, through that process, we came up with a list of leaders in the multifamily space at various levels, CEOs of companies, multifamily educators and operators, leaders of organizations who not only have great experience in being an operator and leading um, small, mid-size, and large management companies or supplier partner companies who support the industry. But every member of our task force is also, a person of faith. And that was really important to us that we really had that cross section of leaders who were focused on, operating communities effectively and leading uh, and building leaders effectively, but that they were also grounded in the mission and the vision and the values, not only that Community Growth Foundation possesses, but those values that we want to share and impart with others through this certificate program.
That's a pretty big order to create something like this. And I love how you said David prayed for you to have the wisdom to say yes. And I think that that prayer hit all of us. And when you're starting something like this, Stephanie, I think about just your footprint in our industry, what you have done over decades of your career, specifically the impact in education, like leading the NAAI and creating multiple education initiatives. Why why is faith inspired leadership, specifically Christian faith or Christ centered leadership, important? Why would this stand out to a team to participate in something like this?
Well, I actually worked before I was with Greystar, the global leader in multifamily housing, I actually worked for a company called JPI for 3 years. And during that time, back in the 90s, JPI was very faith forward in their mission and their values in the workplace. And that really made such an impact, not only on me personally, but on our team members, on our culture, and our mission, vision, and values. But it also showed up in the way that we interacted with our residents and our clients. And so when David reached out to me, I'd had a personal experience with a company who was faith forward, and it was such a positive experience. And then, through my time in multifamily, I was blessed to work for a company that really supports their leaders being involved in the industry and giving back. And so, through my work at NAA and NAAEI, I was fortunate to meet so many leaders. You and I met through multifamily networking and conferences and our work together at NAA. And I've met many other company leaders who really shared that same sentiment. I think what's interesting, though, we do want to be careful that we don't ever make anyone feel excluded or not part of or not included, right? And so I think sometimes companies or company leaders are a little bit apprehensive about sharing their faith, or maybe they heard a message somewhere along the way that it was not appropriate or that it was, not okay to do so. I think we have to be careful on how we do that, right? And that the message is of, love and support and acceptance, and not in any way, shape, or form excluding anyone. One thing that pops out at me when I started my entrepreneurial journey 5 years ago, and you can see on the screen behind me, I aligned myself with Maxwell Leadership. And while Maxwell Leadership is not technically a Christian company, John C. Maxwell himself was a pastor for 25 years before starting the organization. And the way that happened is he was writing books that actually resonated with more of the secular business people than it was with Christians. And his publisher said, "Hey, you've got an audience here who needs your wisdom." At any rate, John frequently says at IMC and to leaders, we are not a Christian company. And while I am a person of faith, and I'm going to share that with you, and a lot of my leadership principles could be found in the Bible, um, we accept everyone. We welcome everyone. We love you. We support you. We invite you to be with us regardless. And I think that's kind of the vein that, or in the lens that we're looking through, right? So we want to embody um, Christian principles to guide us in how we lead our teams and how we support our residents, particularly when we are um, handling challenging situations, that we remember to show up in a way that honors the whole human being and treats them with respect and love. And that's all founded in Christian principles.
Absolutely. One of the things I love the most about our task force, and we'll share many of the names of the dynamic leaders who lended their expertise and their leadership to this platform, but there was discussion very early on about interfaith, about respect of faith, and that although for all of us it was important to have, like you said, that foundation of Christ and Bible based leadership, that it is inclusive for all to learn. And that's one of the beautiful things about a partnership with a university like Grand Canyon, where we had leaders who shared, hey, we have students that are not just Christian students. They come to learn from a theological aspect. They come to understand, hey, what are the shared values? How do I interact and work alongside my Christian colleagues in our economy, in our society, and for corporate leadership? And so that is a beautiful thing that we were very mindful of those conversations early on. So, Stephanie, tell us more. You dropped a few names of some
Sure.
industry heavy hitters, but tell us more about the assembled team. Who are some of the other leaders who lended their expertise, curriculum development, review to this project and to this course?
Absolutely. So I reached out to several leaders, and I was honestly thrilled that almost everyone said yes. Now, there were a few people who said yes in the beginning, and just given their
Yeah.
expansive roles and travel, they at some point said, "Hey, Stephanie, I've got to drop out of being actively engaged in the task force itself, but I am here to support." And they've continued to do that. So let me go through the list of leaders who were actively involved on the task force. So obviously you, and but I want to talk about you in just a moment because you have a very special role, which I'm super excited about. So we have leaders like Donna Summers, who is the president of Gables Residential. And I actually have known Donna through the industry, but I met her and got to know her when I was at the Redemptive Real Estate Summit about 2 years ago. And I was there with David Snyder and Erna, who is his chief of staff, and we were socializing, this task force and what our plans were to create this faith-based certificate program. And Donna came up to me after the session and she said, "I want to be on your task force." I'm like, "You got it." So that's kind of how that happened, which was really exciting. I didn't have to ask her, she asked me. The next leader, actually, at that same conference, he was sitting at a round table with me, and I had planned on reaching out to him anyway, but I was sitting next to Pete Kelly, and we were um, in a breakout session afterwards, and I just made the ask, and I said, "Pete, you're on the board for CGF, and the work that you do at Apartment Life is so important to our residents and our communities," right? So talk about a faith-based organization. They put cares teams on communities to really bridge the gap between the community team and the residents, and the work they do is so impactful. And so I just made the ask and I said, "Pete, would you serve on our task force?" And he said, "Yes." So that was such a blessing. My friend, Kendall Pretzer, who I've known long before her days at Grace Hill, um, when she was, had her own company, and we used her at both JPI and Graystar. But I've known Kendall for a long time. I know she's a person of faith. She's the CEO of Grace Hill. So I reached out to Kendall, and she serves on the Apartment Life board. So I had a good feeling that this would be aligned with her, not only her faith, but also her vision for what's needed in the industry. And she said yes, which was such a blessing. Our friend and fellow national speaker, Chakora Connor, who's also the CEO of Occupancy Heroes, she said yes. Suzanne Pratt, who is our friend, and I've known Suzanne for a long time, 15, maybe 20 years in the industry. And I do some meaningful work with Suzanne at the Triangle Apartment Association for their Leadership Lyceum program. And so I said, "Hey, Suzanne, I need you. I need your wisdom and your input here." And she said yes. So Suzanne is the Director of Education for the Triangle Apartment Association. Another longtime industry colleague and personal friend, Cynthia Ann King, who I actually hired as a consultant years ago after meeting her at Multifamily Brainstorming, which is where you and I met years later.
Yeah.
Cynthia Ann and I have spoken on stages. We've traveled together. We've served on other task force with the Education Institute and the National Apartment Association. And so I reached out to Cynthia Ann and said, "Hey, would you serve?" She is currently serving as the Vice President of Learning and Development for 42. And then Teresa DeVos, who I actually connected with through our mutual friend, Dr. Debbie Phillips. And so Dr. Debbie absolutely supports this initiative. We both know she's incredibly busy. And when I reached out to her to talk to her about this, she said, "I have the perfect person for you." So Teresa DeVos is actually was in asset management. She served multiple leadership roles in multifamily, and she is now a multifamily asset management consultant. This was perfect timing for her. And then, of course, last but not least, you, my friend, international speaker, multifamily leader, and excited to announce that you will be and are the adjunct professor for the inaugural pilot program for this course, which is a huge undertaking and a big calling. And I'm so thrilled that you said yes to that. I did also want to point out, though, that in addition to the task force helping to really create the framework for our vision, our mission, our values, the framework for um, the overarching content of what we wanted to be included in the program. Once we solidified that, which was an undertaking of several months, then it was time for us to work with the Grand Canyon University curriculum design team. And during that process, we had to identify two subject matter experts and a peer reviewer from our task force. And so, as you mentioned, I served as the lead subject matter expert. Cynthia Ann said yes when I asked her to serve as a subject matter expert,
Yeah.
and as well as Teresa DeVos, or DeVoe, rather. I said DeVos because that's how it's spelled. It's DeVoe. Um, and while, both of them, I think at one point one was labeled a peer reviewer, the other was an SME. Really, they both served as not only peer reviewers, but also subject matter experts. There were months of weekly and sometimes multiple times a week deep dive calls between the three of us. And then we had scheduled and structured calls with the curriculum development team, with five of their team members. And so really it was a huge undertaking, but one that we were very happy to contribute our time, talents, and treasures to. And I'm thrilled with the fact, number one, that it's finally here. But number two, I'm thrilled with where we landed. Now, granted, this is a pilot. And so anytime we pilot something, we know,
Yes.
hey, this is the first pass. And so we expect
Mhm.
there to be ongoing revisions, iterations, opportunities for improvement. And that's where I'm thrilled, Melissa, that you said yes to being the adjunct professor, because I think having someone not only that has industry experience, not only that has a master's degree, someone who's not only already been a college professor, but the fact that you've been intimately involved in this project and this vision from the onset is huge, because you have the right lenses and multiple ones to really look at this.
Mhm.
Um, Experience it, right? Be immersed in it and be able to give us actionable feedback from a task force member perspective, from an educator perspective, and then also what that student experience is like. So I'm so thrilled that
Yeah.
you said yes. And I want you to talk about that conversation for a moment, if you don't mind, because once
Yeah.
again, I made the call, right, while I was driving to Dallas for the International Maxwell Conference back in March, because
Yeah.
I'd had a call with, Dr. Slover at the university, who's the assistant dean overseeing this program, and then Jeremy Edmonston with Community Growth Foundation. And we were talking about the pilot program. Can we make it happen? What are the dates? What do we need in order to make this happen? And then what do we need from an instructor standpoint?
Mhm.
And Dr. Slover was telling me, well, we need someone with a master's degree. They have to have at least 5 years property management experience. And I said, I have the perfect person in mind, and I'm going to pray right now that she says yes. And I said, if this is anything like our last conversation when I asked her to be part of the task force and it was a God thing, I'm hoping that this is another God thing. And they were like, well, your lips to God's ears. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about that conversation, because I think it was so wonderful.
Yeah. I'll briefly share the testimony. This is for everyone watching or anyone connected to you and your teams who you may be at that crossroads of um, your values, your faith. If you are a believer and a Christ follower like me, um, some may know. I really leaned in wholeheartedly to my call to not shy away from fully indoctrinating and incorporating my faith into my work as a consultant. And as God would have it, around the same time that we were starting the task force, I literally was given or walked into the assignment of being a full-time professor at another institution. And so it was as if God was saying, hey, I'm going to bring it all together. And I want to encourage anybody who's thinking about this and your ears kind of perked up like, wow, what is this? This is a call or opportunity to integrate everything that you are. We talk about bringing your whole self to work. And I always say that um, age and generation and faith diversity. They're like the last wave of movements that we need in the workplace. It's evident. You have 5 generations in the workforce. And when you look at the billions of people in the workforce, we all have a value system, a ethos. And now with this particular program, I'm like, wow, this was a differentiator. It was seeing the opportunity to shift from mentorship to discipleship. It was the opportunity to say, God, this is legacy work. And Dr. Debbie talks about that all the time. We in our conversations, building legacy work. And that's what I saw when I'm honored. I am incredibly honored that I get to sit with these giants of our industry and not only know their thought process, we talked about operations, we talked about ethics, we talked about our faith, morals, our biblical principles, but there were some real moments on there where we leaned into our testimonies. I got to hear the faith crossroads and hear about discipleship from Pete Kelly, CEO of Apartment Life. I got to hear testimonies of how some have lived out their faith even quietly just through your work ethic, right? And how to bring all of that. And so I'm in awe, honestly, that wow, God, I get to do this. I get to leave a mark on the industry by teaching something with my colleagues. And I just want to do I want to do well in respect to the incredible amount of work that we've all put into this. And so now to get across the finish line, we have some students who jumped right on the opportunity. Right now, I'm in the process of training and learning the student perspective. It's an online asynchronous, which means it's a completely online course at your pace. And we'll talk more about that. But Stephanie, this embodies the concept we call career as a calling.
Yeah.
And there was so much synergy and alignment. Some of you may or may not know Grand Canyon University is a Christian or Christ-centered university, but they educate students globally from all over the world and all faith backgrounds who desire that foundation of a biblical education. And so, yeah, I'm excited. And so I want to go back to something I said though about career as a calling. We talked about that a lot, right?
Mhm.
So why explain what that means to you and why that should resonate. Like why should we be looking at specifically our multifamily careers as a calling from God to serve? It goes back to stewardship. And I won't answer for you, but that was a big conversation that we had early on.
Well, I think so a lot of the work that I do with people is about helping them understand and lead themselves and then understanding and leading others, right? And
Mhm.
so through that self-discovery process, I work with people sometimes who are not happy. They're not in a job or a career that they see as a calling or tied to their purpose or matched to their strengths. And that's very sad to me because every single person was put on this earth to make a difference and an impact in the lives of others, right? And so I mentioned earlier, we touch people in one of their most important environments, their home. And if we think about why they're moving into our apartment communities, usually there's some sort of major life change that's prompting that, right? So maybe they're leaving home for the first time and going to college. Maybe they are getting married and it's their first home together. Maybe someone got divorced and it's their first time being on their own after being married for years. Maybe someone's getting up there in years and they've sold their family home they've lived in and raised their kids in for 40 years. And now this is their first time downsizing and being in an apartment community. Maybe they just moved across the country and not only are they relocating, but maybe they also have a new job. So you think about all of those major life changes, right? Um, we are dealing with people who are in some of the most fragile states of their lives, and I don't know that generally speaking, that concept is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, right? Particularly if you're just thinking of leasing apartments, for example, as a job. or fixing air conditioners as a job. But if you change your frame of reference, and if you realize the impact that we truly have in the lives of others, and you see the difference that you can make with one conversation, one interaction, one solution provided, one ear lent to someone, 1 ounce of compassion, and you see it as a calling, think about the difference that you can make and the ripple effect that that can have in so many people's lives, right? And so I think that's why we want to help people see it as a calling, or also people who know that there's more in them. There's more in them. There's more in them. Craig Rochelle says that. He was part of one of my Live to Lead speakers, and he talked about really seeing what you have in you and what God puts in you. And there's more in you. There's more in you. There's more in you. I'm telling you, there's more in you. Right. And so there is more in us. There is more in you. But what's in you is not just meant for you, it's meant for others, the other people you can impact. And so that's really what it means, for it to be a calling. Like, what is the difference that you can make in the world? What's the impact that you can make in the world? Some people hear that and they think, oh, that's woo woo talk. It's I'm just little old me. Every little old me can make a difference. Think about when you're in line at the grocery store, right? Or we've seen those great videos about, being in the drive-through at Starbucks or being in line at the grocery store, or during the holidays like Toys R Us or Target. Someone has something on layaway and someone pays for that for them. Um, Little old you can make a difference in the lives of others. And maybe you can't pay for someone's layaway, but you could pay for a $3 or $5 coffee, right? Or
Mhm.
you don't have to pay anything. You can just give someone a smile and truly listen to them and truly give them compassion. And you may be the only person that smiled at them that day, that's
Mhm.
really heard them that day, that's really made them feel seen that day. Think about what an impact you can make in someone's life. And you may have been the exact right person in that moment to do that, and they needed that more than ever, and you didn't even know. So when we think about calling, it's big. It's your big why, right?
Big.
Why are you on this earth? Why are you here? What is the difference that you can make? And we can make a difference not just in the big things that we do, but really in those daily interactions, those little things that we do that can make a huge difference. And, this quote comes to mind, Maya Angelou, right?
Mhm.
People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And,
Mhm.
how we make people feel from a customer service standpoint has everything to do with whether or not they decide to lease an apartment with us, with whether or not they decide to renew with us, with whether or not they want to do business with us, if you're not leasing apartments, but you're dealing with clients. So how we make people feel is huge. And look at what's out there. The last I'll land on this for this answer, but look at what's out there in the world today in terms of social media, the news. There can be so much negativity if that's what you're paying attention to.
Mhm.
But there can also be so much positivity. Um, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world, Gandhi, right? Um, be that. And that's what we want. We want to inspire people through faith to be that person who makes a difference in the lives of others. And we want to create, future leaders who embody that so that we could truly can make an impact in our communities, which again is the Community Growth Foundation's vision. If you think about the name,
Yes.
Community Growth Foundation, how do we create a foundation to grow our communities grounded in faith, and a phrase that David uses often is we truly want to focus on creating wholeness in our communities,
Yes.
wholeness in the people we serve, whether it's team members, clients, residents, and the overall community. We want to create wholeness. And I just love that.
I'm glad you pinned that point about wholeness in our communities. And so we have viewers that are watching this that may or may not be in our industry. And it was really important we specifically tailored this to property management or multifamily industry. And for those who may or may not be familiar, and I'm saying this because there are many students or new young adults who are we're in graduation season, they're graduating, they're choosing careers, they're kind of choosing a life path. And this industry has been it gives back so much, and there's so many opportunities, and we're just creating that awareness for property management careers. Some of you may be interested in this program and you're already established in your career. Interestingly enough, even with recruiting and starting my onboarding at Grand Canyon, the recruiter was from our industry. She had
Love
7 years
that.
experience, and I was like, wow, really? And so she was just fascinated. She's like, oh my goodness, if this was around when I started, like this is incredible. And then I can say this from a personal standpoint. Here's a differentiator. We have some dynamic, I mean, absolutely incredible educational programs in our industry. And what the property management industry is it's simply that it's the multifamily industry. If you live in an apartment, have passed by an apartment, there is a whole industry, a multi-billion dollar industry that backs these communities. But there are the people that steward these assets, who lead these teams. And so for me, I'm gonna put my faith hat on for a second, Stephanie. For
Please.
me, as a Christian faith-based leader, as clergy, I live at the intersection. I daily live at the intersection of kingdom, corporate, and community. That is my ethos. And so now, when I even before this the task force came along, and now this course, I daily ask myself, how do I properly steward the people, the places, and the opportunities I'm presented with? And so now it shifts from a job choice and a career trajectory to now a calling to serve people and serve God through our daily work. And that is different. Your why becomes different, how we govern ourselves among people, even knowing, and this has become so real to me because one of my favorite scriptures is like, it's going to sound crazy, but there's a scripture that says teachers are judged more harshly. And that was hard for me. And I know that, like, I would know that scripture, but then I understood that to teach and instruct someone is you're now guiding them on the decisions that they will make on our properties, in our assets, in our corporations. So putting together instruction like this is not likely, even according to the word. It says we're judged harshly. We have to be sure and correct and exact and mindful. That's why these experts, oh my goodness, the time, the prayer, the intentionality to create and assemble this course was just absolutely powerful. I want to talk to the operators and the owners and the leaders, the executives that listen to this, because there's we have to present a case for the executive reason, the physical reason of responsibility. Why faith-based leadership? And friend, I have to say, last week I spent a few days at the Dare to Overcome Faith at Work conference, and I thought the same thing. Is like, if I have to state a case, right? If either of us have to state a case and give a why for why faith-based leadership matters, there's statistics for this, that statistically speaking, teams that are allowed to bring their value system to work, specifically if you're talking about faith-based or Christ-centered values, whether through resource groups and now this education opportunity, perform at a higher level because their why is not because they answer to the company anymore. Their why is a higher calling. So even for me, it's like I don't just answer to my boss or to the university or to my team. I answer to God for how I steward this opportunity. And so it's a higher calling for why people stay. It increases your retention rate because now I was so excited. Like, we get to openly kind of have like class and Bible study at the same time. So from your perspective, what would you say to an owner, operator, president, CEO, VP of why their teams should invest in training like this, because we do have it open where you can sponsor or recommend your team members to be a part of this pilot program.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to everything I was just saying. So I'm going to talk about statistics from Gallup for a moment. So, I'm an assessment geek, right? I leverage a lot of assessments with my clients. I'm a
Yep.
certified DISC consultant and Clifton Strengths facilitator. And so Gallup, who owns Clifton Strengths, they've done a lot of research on team member engagement, as well as profitability. And
Mhm.
people who can bring their strengths to work, their values to work, not only are they happier, not only are they more engaged, they're more productive, and the organization is more profitable.
Yeah.
So you're going to have better longevity. You're going to have happier, more engaged people, because the disengaged team member is the most potentially damaging to your entire organization and your culture. And we're talking about actively disengaged, meaning, it's like we've all heard that saying, what happens with one bad apple,
Spoils the
right?
yeah.
Spoils the bunch. And so that happens with actively disengaged team members. And there's tons of statistics about that. Gallup, Pew Research. I'm happy to share. If anyone's interested, contact me. Um, but there is data and statistics to back that up. And when Gallup provides that data, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of organizations, small, medium, large, across the nation, but also worldwide. And so the statistics back up that people who can leverage their strengths, bring their full, whole selves to the workplace, there are benefits to them personally. And those personal benefits to them are going to result in better productivity and better profitability, less turnover, higher engagement for every organization. So, why not faith
Why?
inspired leadership, right?
So good. So good. So let's talk about the enrollment because it's open
Yes.
and we are on the countdown. Everybody's on a countdown to apartmentalize. But hey, in the midst of your to-do list, add to your list, enroll, apply for the Faith Inspired Leadership and Property Management Program. So as you're
Yes.
talking about the enrollment, I'm gonna pull up the website. We have an incredible marketing team. Shout out to Lene. She has been awesome in pulling together the creative and the visuals behind this. So, Stephanie, tell us more about the pilot program, the enrollment process, and more about that as I pull this up.
You bet. So, as Melissa mentioned, and we did take apartmentalize into consideration, right? Because this is a property management industry based program. We are actively socializing this through our network in multifamily, and many of us are going to be at apartmentalize in New Orleans beginning June 15th. So our deadline for enrollment is actually June 15th, but that means don't wait until the deadline. Today's June 1st. You got 14 days before that deadline. So, we would encourage you to apply beforehand. And Melissa, thank you for pulling that up. So our initial cohort, this pilot, is maxed at 25 team members, and we're keeping this pilot small on purpose because that's going to give us an opportunity for Melissa to really interact with these students, for us to get actual feedback from them. They're going to get more personalized instruction, which is super exciting for anyone who wants to take advantage of this pilot cohort. That's pretty special because the full course um, will launch this fall. But being part of this pilot program is really a special opportunity. So take advantage of that. We've had several people apply already. As Melissa's showing you, when you go to the landing page, it's going to reiterate, what you're going to get out of it, what you're going to learn, and be able to apply in your career in property management, but honestly, in your life, really. It's both professional development, but it's also personal growth. And that's really exciting. So June 15th is the deadline. The actual pilot itself will start after apartmentalize. So towards the end of June, applicants will receive specific start date information once they apply during the enrollment process. So you'll receive a lot more information about the detailed specifics. It is an 8-week, as Melissa mentioned, online on demand program, but students will be interacting with Melissa, as she mentioned, in an asynchronous format, which is really exciting. So think message boards, videos. There's obviously assignments and things of that nature that will occur each week for each module or lesson included in the program. So Melissa will be there to help guide, support, and mentor the students so that you are moving through the program successfully and holding not only holding yourself accountable but also having an accountability partner in terms of the instructor to make sure that you successfully move through the course to completion. Melissa, I see that you've pulled up some of the videos here from our task force. I did want to make mention of the ethics module. Can we talk about that for just a moment?
Absolutely,
um,
we can.
because one of our modules is ethics, and I was really honored. Again, I reached out to leaders, and many of them were our current task force members. But I reached out to leaders and said, "Hey, we're doing this ethics module, and we want rather than expecting our students to go and find and source." Leaders within the industry to interview and hoping that they're available and they can say yes and get it done within their deadline. We want to provide them a series of ethics interviews from people who we know have made an incredible impact in multifamily with different backgrounds and expertise. So thank you for pulling that up there, Melissa. So we've got Melissa, obviously, as our professor. Listed there. Rick Graff, who has been a multifamily CEO, past chairman of NAA, of Texas Apartment Association, still very involved and influential in the industry. He participated in an interview with me. Scott Wilder, who is the president of Willowbridge and longtime leader and respected leader in multifamily and very involved. Jeremy Edmonston, who I mentioned, multifamily executive director for many organizations in the industry. Donna Summers, the president of Gables Residential. Cynthia Ann King, who you see here, I mentioned earlier, is the vice president of learning development at 42 and also served as an SME. She's also been a respected speaker and consultant in the industry for many years. There we've got Donna Summer, again, president of Gables. Suzanne Pratt, director of education for the Triangle Apartment Association. Teresa DeVoe, multifamily asset management consultant. So I was just super honored, and everyone did such a fantastic job of talking about, what do you do when you're faced with a potential ethical dilemma? And those happen in our industry. Like, look,
Yes.
we're dealing with people, we're dealing with multi-million dollar assets.
Mhm.
Things happen, things go wrong. We're dealing with many different clients, many of us who are in fee management. Um, and things happen. And so what do you do when you're presented with a circumstance that can feel not only challenging to deal with and messy to deal with, but where there might be some things that make you question, is this the right thing to do, or what is the right thing to do? And so it was great to have those conversations with each of those leaders as they shared their wisdom, insights, experiences. Some of them shared some very specific examples. So I'm thrilled about our students participating in that and what they're going to get out of it. It's huge. Yeah.
Absolutely. So listen, everyone, you've heard what this is. You've heard what we're about. This is all about connecting your faith with Bible-based teaching, with leadership development, property management, leadership development. This is a great opportunity, especially now. Take this information to your team, leaders. Think about who you may want to recommend, sponsor for this program. Like you said, we already have slots being filled up for it as we kick off. I'm excited, like that I even get to teach this program. As Stephanie mentioned, it is online, but that doesn't mean disconnected. It means we're going to be fully engaged with one another. There'll be case studies. You'll get to learn hands on. How would I apply these leadership principles to real life situations, as Stephanie said? So here's our call to action for you. Register today. If this piqued your interest, if it came up on your timeline, it's not a coincidence. It's because it's an opportunity. As we said, we're not the only ones. We assembled a team of leaders who I believe, Stephanie, are just a small representation of the larger body of not only believers, and know you don't have to be a Christian or a believer to participate. Just know that it's given through that lens of perspective, which might even spark or increase your faith, or at least a perspective of, hey, how do I approach my career and property management as a calling and see it as an opportunity to steward and serve at a higher level? It has been so incredible, Stephanie. Stephanie, I want to publicly say thank you on behalf of myself and the entire task force. You took this thing by the helm and you didn't let it fall. And I want to thank you. I know I saw a glimpse of what this took as you are leading, traveling. We see all of your airport check ins as you're zigzagging across the country, teaching and equipping others in our industry and hitting the stage. And so, friend, I honor you. I thank you to Dave Snyder for this overarching vision and for just sharing that mantle and that torch into our team. Thank you for your hours, your commitment, the meetings, the effort, and your thoughts, your thought leadership, which is definitely legacy work. Guys, we want to see you enroll. Click the link. I put the enrollment link on all platforms. We'll continue to share this out. Stay tuned for our Faith Inspired Leadership series. We want to bring you more of our task force leaders so you can hear directly from them why faith inspired leadership, why now, and why it is just a good investment to sponsor your teams for this. Great day, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Melissa.
Mhm.